Hello, Mark. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good.
Okay, we'll get this, like to call to order this Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency meeting for the town of Woodstock for April 1st, 2024 at 7:04 p.m. We will begin with a roll call. William Rowinski,
Marla Butts.
Mark Parker.
Stuart Peasley.
okay, everyone is present and we do not need to appoint any alternates.
My name's Tim Osborne.
Okay, thank you. Stuart, is your Pamela Peasley Hunter, is that your mother?
Yes.
Okay. She passed away recently. I would like to observe a moment of silence in the honor and memory of Stuart's mother, Pamela Peasley Hunter.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you. Okay, actions of the minutes of the previous meeting. Does anybody have any comments or other corrections to add or change?
I had one spelling error. There's an E missing on my name. I forget, and I don't have it in front of me, but it's not a big deal.
You don't have two E's at the end of Peasley?
Correct.
Only one. Okay.
Somewhere. It's somewhere.
That's on item 4 action. It's actually showing up everywhere with two E's.
Except one.
And it should only be one?
No. One of the spellings has only one E.
Oh, has only one E. Okay.
It's okay. Not a big deal.
It's a Scribner's error, that's all.
Yeah.
Bill Rowinski had on item, let's see, what is it? 6 new applications, 6C. There is 3 lines down, notation of a grass strip. I think there should be another S there, grass strip. Just for clarity. Notation of a grass strip.
Just goes to show you see what you want to see. I didn't even see that. Okay. I didn't see anything wrong with it. There were a couple of questions in there that were raised regarding records and disposal and the paperwork filed by the Wyndham Waterworks, and I expect that Dan will probably give a response to that during his report.
Okay, Mark, do you see anything that you would like to be changed?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so I would entertain a motion to accept the minutes of the March 4th, 2024 Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Agency meeting.
This is
I
Stuart.
move we
Oh.
accept the minutes of the meeting last month's March 4th as corrected.
I'll second. Stuart Peasley.
Okay, with the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, anybody opposed, abstain? Okay, the motion carries. Now, we have a new agenda item for this meeting that will carry forward, and that is citizens' comments. And from my recollection of our adding this in, it was intended to be more of comments of a briefer nature and not lengthy dissections of certain issues. Does anybody have any citizens' comments that they would like to put forward right now? Unmute yourself if you need to. Okay, not hearing anything. We will move on. Pending applications. It looks like we don't have any. New applications. Transfer of permit 12-22-02 Rocky Hill Road, Shane Pollock to Tim Osborne.
Yes, and I'm Tim Osborne.
Yep.
I apologize if I don't know what to say and when. I've never been part of a meeting like this.
That's okay.
All right.
Does anybody have any comments or
I have some-
questions?
Some questions. Was any of the work initiated under the original approval?
No,
Okay, so, okay,
I think there were actually some test pits. We've walked the property quite a few times. There were some test pits. Actually, I should correct what I said. There were some test pits dug by the previous owner.
mhm,
And the only thing that I've had done on the property so far is Killingly Engineering Associates have gone in and flagged the clearing limit. We were just interested to see exactly where the house would sit and exactly where the driveway would fall within.
so, I just wanted to let the commission know that Dan, had talked to me about the transfer. And we didn't have a form for it, for transferring permits, so, I suggested that he take the transfer form that they have in Thompson and revise it to have it say Woodstock. So this form that you see is a new form for the commission. And I think it's adequate to meet the needs for the transfer. The contact information is there. And you've got the release from the prospective permittee, and you have the signature. Oh, wait a minute, let's see. Timothy, is that Shane's signature?
It is.
Under-
And, Shane Pollock. As a matter of fact, Norman from Killingly Engineering Associates had Shane into his office last week and took care of obtaining his signature while he was there.
Okay, all right, so that's his. Okay, I don't see a problem, though. I would move to approve the transfer permit 12-22-02 from Shane Pollock to Tim Osborne. That's map block lot 5783 4704 E on Rocky Hill Road.
Yeah.
That's a motion. To
A
approve.
second,
Who was the second?
it was simultaneously.
Okay,
I think it was me. I might have been in there by a squeaky over Stewart, but whatever.
No, I didn't. That was you.
Oh.
I think you heard your own echo. You're
Oh,
in an
okay.
echo chamber.
Okay, all right, very good.
No, I didn't do anything that time.
okay. We have a motion made by Marla Butts, seconded by Mark Parker to approve the transfer of permit 12-22-02 Rocky Hill Road, Shane Pollock to Tim Osborne, map block land unit 5783-4704E.
I'd like to amend the motion to say that it's to Timothy and Wendy Osborne.
Yeah.
Not just to Tim Osborne, it's Timothy and Wendy Osborne.
I agree to that modification.
Okay, we have the same motion with the modification of adding Wendy Osborne. If there's no further, is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Against, nay, abstain. Okay, so moved, the motion passes.
Thank you.
Next,
Could I ask a quick question? I'm not sure if I'm supposed to leave at this point or stay. What should I do? What would
You're
you like me to do?
you are welcome to stay if you would like. We're completed with your business for this evening. We don't need you here for anything further. If you'd like to comment later on, and that's fine to stay.
If you'd like me to comment later, I'll stay. I just didn't want to be rude if I left. I want to do what,
No, you're not being rude. That's from our point of view that we've done everything that we will do for this application.
very good. Thank you very much.
Yep, you're welcome.
Okay, bye now.
Yeah, good night. Moving on, application 03-24-08, Barlow Cemetery Road, Michael Bartlett, Hull for J.R. Woodlot. Timber harvest.
This property is currently owned by J.R. Woodlot, who's Jane and Robert Sumner. Property has been in the Sumner family for at least 4 generations for this purpose of harvesting timber periodically. This will be the 3rd treatment by Hull Forest Products. It was property was harvested in 1980, again in 97, and they're planning on doing another one now. Basically, a selection and group selection harvest. It does involve 2 pretty minor stream crossings. They're about 2 feet wide, and one of them has a little bit of wetland adjoining to it, bordering it. So the plan is to use timber mats for those crossings, and any other spots that may need them along the way in light of the fine weather we've been having for the last year plus. There are several vernal pools on the property. We're retaining at least 70% of the basal area within a 100-foot buffer of those vernal pools. So my opinion, it's a fine example of good forest management, not strictly for timber purposes, but for water, wildlife, and so forth. It's a very nice property, and it's a pleasure to see the results of past work come to fruition. With this harvest here, our proposal is to take out 552,000 board feet. The 2 previous harvests have removed 500,000 board feet. There will still be 700,000 board feet left standing on this property following our harvest.
Okay, I have a question for you, Mr. Bartlett. This is Bill Rowinski. You have on that map on your screen, you have your truck road coming off of Barlow Cemetery Road. And there's also a stream there, which would make a 3rd stream crossing.
Yes, I did mention in the narrative there is an existing culvert there.
Okay. I didn't pick that out. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any?
It's an existing 12-inch cement culvert there in that crossing.
Okay. Does anybody have any comments?
I move to approve application 03-24-08 Barlow Cemetery Road for Hull Forest Products on J.R. Woodlot LLC for timber harvest, map block lot 6387-41-02 as a use permitted as of right under agriculture.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion made by Marla Butts and seconded by Stuart Peasley to approve this motion, this application for timber harvest. Is there any further discussion or questions? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, abstain, the motion carries. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Application 03-24-09, Old Turnpike Road, map block lot 5124-19-17, Christopher Lemery for Hull for Douglas Builders for a timber harvest.
Good evening, everybody. My
Hello,
name is Christopher Lemery, Forest Technician for Hall Forest Products. Today, I'm going to be presenting to you a timber harvest plan for a 22-acre property off of Old Turnpike Road owned by Douglas Builders, LLC. The planned prescription is going to be a selective harvest. We're planning on taking around an estimated volume of about 98,000 board feet and about 30 cords. There will be no new roads placed, but all existing skid roads and new skid roads will be placed where needed. No wetland crossings will be involved with this harvest, as well as no stream crossings either. Removal of trees in wetlands as well as the upland review area will be happening. As you can see there, that the landing is right off of Old Turnpike Road, so there's really good access for the pine to be shipped up north by a truck and trailer. And like I said, the harvest prescription is going to be a selective harvest, harvesting basically the worst volume and the worst grade, as well as trying to get some revenue for Nelson Douglas himself.
Okay.
okay, does anybody have any questions?
Is that Black Pond that's on the other side of the road of Old Turnpike Road?
Should be.
Yes, so yep, that's Black Pond there. There is a little wetland that we won't be crossing off to the west there. Well, that's basically a no harvest zone down in there, and that kind of just flows into Black Pond,
Okay.
or as you can see there.
It's on the other side of the road from the YMCA camp.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
I don't see a problem with this. This is actually, except for the cutting in the wetlands, it technically probably wouldn't have been a regulated activity at all. How much cutting are you going to be doing in the wetlands? Is it just selective cut
It's
still?
very minimal. It would be selective cutting. It would be mostly the dead and dying ash. There's quite a bit of ash along that wetland. So we're just going to try to get rid of that, and everything else would be left. It's pretty flat ground. The skid trails that are already through there are pretty well established. The skid trails going off to the east and off to the west are just newer ones that I am proposing placed in just for maneuverability of the machinery.
Okay.
All wildlife trees will also be retained for wildlife purposes.
What do you mean by wildlife trees? Trees with holes in them, or?
Yep, trees with holes in them, snags, and anything like along those lines that are potentially habitat for wildlife.
So Bill, I'm going to move to approve application 03-24-09, Old Turnpike Road, Lemery Hull for Douglas Builders, timber harvest on map block lot 5124-19-17 as a use permitted as of right under agriculture timber harvest.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion made by Marla Butts, seconded by Mark Parker to approve application number 03-24-09, Old Turnpike Road, map block lot 5124-19-17, Christopher Lemery for Hull Forest Products for Douglas Builders for timber harvest as a use permitted as of right for agriculture. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Anybody, nobody opposed? Anybody abstain? The motion carries. So we're all set with that approval.
All righty. Thank you, guys.
Yep, thank you very much, Chris. Okay, we'll move on now to the next application. 03-24-10 Payne Road, map block lot 5165-8-04-7, Town of Woodstock, construction of sediment basin. And we have a group of people here tonight from all parts of this project. And Janet, would you like to go first?
Sure. My name is Janet Blanchett. I'm a professional engineer with J&D Civil Engineers, and I've been working with the town. I see Jason Scranton, the Public Works Director, is on this meeting, and I believe I also saw the property owner, Ron Petro. This Payne Road is a gravel road. There's a location map. I'm not sure which sheet. I think you just had a good aerial up. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good place to start. Near the bottom of the picture, you can see Payne Road, and it's 10 to 12% gravel road. And with the storms that we've been having for the last several years, there's been kind of an extreme erosion problem from the west to the east, and it gets into Peckham Brook and flows downstream where the property owner has a newly constructed pond, and the pond's getting filled with sediment, and it's just a bad situation. There's a lot of sediment transport. I know I met Marla and Dan there. It must have been like 3 years ago. We reviewed the situation, and the options are a little bit limited. I mean, it's a gravel road, so it's always going to erode at that slope. It's not paved. There are no cross culverts from the high point down to Peckham Brook in a distance of over 1,200 feet. So that's, a lot of potential for erosion. So what the best solution that we could come up with at this time is to construct a sediment basin. So we might want to move down to one of the site plans now, to the site plan. It's on one sheet. So yeah, so the sediment basin would be a proposed like excavated structure parallel to Payne Road. Well, it's partially excavated in a partial embankment. It's about 90 feet long by 40 feet wide. And basically the idea is the runoff, comes from the left, comes from the west. And this would give it a place for the sediment to settle out. And eventually, when it's a heavy rain, it'll fill up and it'll flow out another pipe. So the runoff still goes to Peckham Brook, but it should be able to have some settling time, some filtration with stone check dams, and the property owner has agreed that he would be willing to grant a drainage easement to the town to allow for the construction of this sediment basin. And I guess for an introduction, I think hopefully I've given a summary of what's going on. I'm available for questions.
So I have a question, Janet. This is basically an impoundment that is subtended by a dam or a dike. And are there any compaction requirements for the downslope side? Or do you think the volume is
if you look at the cross section at the lower left of the plan, I have it also up on my other laptop. I can read it to you because it is underneath the grid. It's a little hard to see. Let me read.
Okay, yeah, number 2.
Yeah, it's 90%. The fill should be placed in 6 to 12-inch lifts and compacted to 90% dry density.
Okay.
The volume is probably more excavated than
Yes.
embankment, and it's below like any level that would be regulated as a dam by
Oh, yeah.
Connecticut Deep.
I was just concerned that because we've been getting all these huge storms, the big storms, and the likelihood of that emergency spillway working on an unusual storm, because it's not a very large watershed, correct?
Correct. It's less than 5 acres in size
Yes.
that drains to this. And so there is certain requirements in the new stormwater quality manual, and this basin was designed to meet those criteria, including like the certain design storms, the emergency spillways for the 50-year design storm.
So the type of storm that would come in a design storm, is that like a 24-hour storm? I'm thinking more like what we've been getting is like these very localized, heavy, intense rain. It's very small, short term, and very localized. When you designed this, when you said it's a 50-year, is this like a 24-hour storm, or is this how is that? How can we
Yeah, the
expect it to function?
designs. Yeah, well, the design storm that's typically modeled for the design of outlet works is a 24-hour duration storm, whether it's a 2-year, 10-year, 25-year. So in a really hard downpour that's of less duration, I mean, this basin is still going to work because the volume is there. You know, if anything, there'll be more detention time
Yeah.
on like a 2-year storm than there would for a 50-year storm because of the storage volume that's there.
Yeah. So, so that kind of I just kind of want to control Mr. Petro's expectations of how frequently that emergency spillway might work. I mean, if you had a very short, intense storm, short duration, but intense, this was designed on a 24-hour basis rather than, you know, that little episodic kind of storm. So the emergency spillway might function a little more frequently than what you might get from the Weather Service saying that that was not a 24-hour, you know, not a 50-year storm. Would that be a correct
Well,
assumption that he might see that happen?
Well, there's also an outlet pipe. So
Right.
the outlet pipe is what's going to handle uh, almost all storms up until like the 50-year storm. So
Okay.
the emergency spillway, if that's being utilized, if it's flowing out the emergency spillway, it's either a really infrequent large storm event, or the basin is full of sediment and needs to be cleaned.
Gotcha. Is there a
Because
cleaning
this will require maintenance.
is there a cleaning requirement? Like what percentage of the basin gets filled before it needs to be cleaned? So-
Yes, in the operation and maintenance, it says when the basin gets to be to the top of the crushed stone check dam, that's a good visual that it should be, you know, re-excavated out.
Got it. Thank you.
This is Bill Rowinski. You have silt fence detail and sock detail out there also. Are both those intended to be used, or is that just on there as a standard thing?
It's on there as a standard thing. This is going to be a town constructed project. So I think between the town and any contractor they use, they'll decide which erosion control method they want to install down slope of the embankment. I mean, if the commission has some kind of preference and they won't want to, you know, if they prefer something, this would be a great time to, you know, let Jason know he's on the line.
Well, Marla Butt speaking. I have no preference. This is a field, basically. It's not like trees with lots of stones and stuff in it. It's a fairly, in the wattles are easier to use when you're in a situation where you got a lot of stones, which would make towing in or trenching in the silt fence difficult, or if you got tree roots, but you don't have that situation. So I think it's just a preference. I think that for installation, the cost of installation of silt fence are a little more expensive than the cost of installation of the wattles, but the wattles are more expensive. So it depends on where you want to put your money. Do you want to put your money in the labor, or do you want to put your money in the material? I think it's 6 of one, half a dozen of another in this kind of situation. I don't have a preference.
We would most likely use silt fence, I believe.
Okay.
So and then Bill Rowinski, again, on your inlet pipe there from the road, it looks like you might have about 7 foot of drop. Is that correct, or am I looking at it? Not
Let me
not quite that much,
look
maybe?
at that. See. Yeah, I would say not quite that much. It goes from like 441 down to 435 and a half, so like 5.5 feet. So I mean it is a little bit steep there, but it is certainly no worse than the drop off from the gravel road further to the west into the, like the amount of slope that goes from the edge of the road to the ditch.
Would you say that that would be an advantage to keeping that pipe clear of sediment by having that much drop?
Not really.
No.
But you just need to have a certain cover. There's a certain size pipe and you need a certain amount of cover over the pipe, and there's not that much room to the west. It gets in the frontage of another property owner. So
Yeah.
So this application actually is a permit, not a wetlands agent approval because of the work that's occurring right up to the edge of the watercourse. So we would be receiving it tonight, and then next month we can approve it if we have no need to make request modifications. I will say that I actually saw this drawing in a preliminary form, and I made some comments about what I thought some changes that might be useful to make. And looks like all of those were incorporated into this plan. And I have no objection to the issuance of a permit for this, but from a technical standpoint, it can't be approved at this meeting because it's an actual discharge to a watercourse, which is an alteration to a watercourse and or wetland. So I would suggest that if anybody else has any comments on this, that they make them, if they think there should be changes to it, that they should make it now. One thing I did note is this is a 2-to-1 slope, correct, on the embankment on the berm?
correct.
So usually if you're gonna mow it, you have it 3-to-1, but this is a 2-to-1, so it's probably not gonna, it can be weed whacked, but it's probably not gonna be able to be mowed. So just a comment on that.
Bill Rowinski, I'm just going to bring up one more thing here. I don't know who's aware, and if Jay or Ron want to comment on this, but there was some riprap placed up the road further in certain sections in the drainage ditch that serve like small check dams. I don't know who would have put them there and what was the plan for that. It appeared to be slowing down the flow, at least way before it got to the barway crossing, the original barway there. So
I did that as a stopgap measure just until we get this project underway, just to hold back some of that gravel and fine material.
okay, it appeared to be working as I thought it would probably intended to be working when I went by there in one of the big rains. Just making people aware that there was other work done up the road a little bit for that. And probably several of those check dams would appear on this map if we were to add them in.
I hurried it in before the last rainstorm.
Yep.
So because it's outside of the unless it's within 100 feet of a wetland or watercourse, we wouldn't have, or 125 feet of a watercourse or 100 feet from a wetland, we wouldn't have jurisdiction over those check dams. I have a question for Jason. Where do you stand on the drainage easement? How far along has the language been? Has
I
it-
have not submitted it to the town's lawyer yet. I didn't know if there was gonna be any further design changes, and I didn't wanna get the cart before the horse, before that went to the lawyer.
Gotcha. So actually, by the time if we render decision next month, then you would, and if nobody's proposing any changes on this at this point in time, you could move forward with that language. That would give you the time to get that actual approval comes through, and then you could start your construction immediately.
Okay, sure thing. I'll get the ball rolling with that.
That's what I would do. So do we need a motion to accept the application?
I believe so.
Well, then I move to accept application 03-24-10 Payne Road by the town of Woodstock for the construction of a sedimentation basin and maintenance of cross culverts and authorization of the cross culverts on Payne Road. This is map block lot 5165-8-04 through 7. 04 and 7, excuse me.
To be accepted for consideration at next month's meeting, right?
Yes.
I'll second that.
Yeah, go ahead, Pete.
Okay, we have a motion by Marla Butts and seconded by Stuart Peasley to accept application 03-24-10 Payne Road, map lot 5165-8-04-7, Town of Woodstock, construction of a sediment basin. Is there any further discussion on this?
Technically, it's lot 04-7 and 04-4.
Okay,
Two lots.
Stuart, are you okay with that?
I'm fine with that, yes.
Okay. There's no further discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 So the motion carries. We have 4 ayes. Thank you, everyone. We will look forward to discussing this some more in the next meeting. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
you.
Okay, moving on to correspondence. Administrative business, let's do administrative business before correspondence. Going back to our minutes from last month, was any work done on the building code for the Breslaw property? There was a question about change in the building code. Is anybody?
I guess I made the question, so I should have followed up, and I have not.
Okay, so did we, is that permit still in limbo?
I don't believe so. Sorry, I'm trying to fight the Zoom here. I can't find my screen button, but our building official had a week of training and then had a week vacation. So there hasn't been an opportune time to ask him about this, but I don't believe he's held up that permit based on the design presented to him. But I will be digging in further into that, and any leads that Stu might have to him and I can talk about that. Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Because it states with the provision that should the revised building code apply, the application will return to IWWA for modification. So technically that's still in limbo. We don't have that information.
I will check tomorrow to see if the building department has approved that design as it was presented to us. It's possible that it's still in their queue to review. But I'll share an email answer with the commission as soon as I have one.
Okay, thank you.
I think the issue was the size of the shed, right, Dan? The size,
So
once
yeah,
it surpasses a certain amount of square footage, we've got to go with standard footing, pier footing. Which means excavation,
Okay.
which is the whole point that we're talking about it. And I believe that I was just gonna look in the IBC and see what their requirement was. But it could be a simple answer that Paul might have a quick answer for, but I think that just my recollection that we are 10, 15, 20% over what that requirement was.
That would be the new requirement.
Yeah,
The-
and it's not our, and Marla made the point, it's not our jurisdiction, but it is something that I think we should take note of in the future, to, you know, just be careful, be wary of these kind of structures going in. They will require excavation to a certain size.
Okay, but like I said, this application is still pending. It's without an answer to that, it's not officially approved. All right.
Well,
go-
that's that, but Bill, I kind of beg to differ only because it said that it carried the majority approving with the provision that should the revised building code apply, the application will be returned to the wetlands for modification, and they would have to be asking for a modification of their approval.
Okay. Yeah,
It's
fair
not
enough.
like it's not like it hasn't been approved, it has, but if they need to make a change, so they gotta do excavation, they've gotta come back to the commission and explain what the extent of that work is, if they need to do it. And if they don't need to do it, then they don't need to come back.
Okay, I'll agree with that.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Dan needs to give us an answer for that, though. So we know.
And that would be determined by the building official.
Correct.
Okay, then the other one for the child road, the garage, there was an updated plant drawing requested, revised drawing indicating stockpiles and additional ENS controls and show excavation for underground utilities. Do we have any of that yet, Dan?
yeah, that was presented the next day. Sorry, it's already in my rear view mirror, answering that question. But that was satisfied by Mr. Page the next office day.
So you do have the drawing?
Yeah.
Okay,
And also the same with, we had a Dorothy Whitehead application on Little Bungie Road. Where the builder had presented a draft plan and the commission's approval was conditional on a final sign and sealed. We did finally receive that, and I noticed I wrote my approval and submitted that to the villager for publication. So that's still under an appeals timeline.
yeah, I did notice the legal notice. So the other question from the minutes, previous minutes are, has Wyndham Waterworks filed requested paperwork with the land use office?
Yep, they have. They filed, it was a pretty old map. So we are bound to collect or ask the applicant for any activity that is occurring within their watershed area to submit their form to the watershed. I believe we have other watershed districts, but they're not on file with the clerk. That would be, do we touch the Sturbridge district? but also the town of Putnam's. But those maps haven't been filed with the clerk. So I still, on our webpage, where I mentioned notification to the watershed companies that that Putnam is one of those, and every now and then we find somebody who found a generic form and sent it their way and told us they didn't get any response. So, but I'll be reaching out to any applicable watershed districts for an updated map. I believe the watershed Wind and Water Works updated their forms. And if I'm trying to get on board with a notification to the Putnam watershed district, just so we have consistency in with our applications that we receive here. If if the statute says they're supposed to be submitting somewhere, that it's just equal opportunity for everybody to notify their watershed district. Putnam one is a concern of mine. The Roseland Park, the Roseland Pond feeds Putnam. It's water supply, and there's always concerns with Roseland that we should be looking at making sure our projects that we approve don't impact water quality on that side of town.
Well, that brings up a point that there is potential for a talk of modifications in Roseland Park that would require some wetlands approvals. And it might be a good idea to somebody start doing the work. As far as I know, I don't believe anybody knows who owns the bed of Roseland Lake. So I think I've looked at that before and it was a question mark, or at least on one of the town maps, perhaps it was a question mark. So that's some investigation that might need to be done when the park starts coming with permits.
I'm happy to look into that.
Yeah.
Interesting question.
Yep. Let's go to this, right down to your attachments there. Since we're talking correspondence in regards to the Bentley Dam and berm from Deep. I don't know how many people have taken the time to look at that. And,
So Deep had sent these by email to, I think it was building clerk at woodstockct.gov. That was Tina LaJoie's old email, unmonitored. We didn't get this via paper. This came to us. I had contacted Deep for correspondence because it was correspondence from Deep was referenced by some of his neighbors. And I said, oh, we didn't get that. We didn't get that. And they sent this over to me. Mr. Bentley had sent around this letter, which prompted a few phone calls. It's was done on behalf of Mr. Bentley from the law offices of Brian Mead. I think, in a sense, disputing the state's position and raising concern with his neighbors that if he removed this dam, that it could cause issue for them, that it's doing good for them right now, having it in place. I called Deep after we got a copy of this from a resident, and they said he's still under obligation to have this registered, certified by an engineer and registered or be constructed. One of my concerns is what kind of plan it goes into this deconstruction. And they told me in an engineered plan, but I will have that concern until I see an engineered plan.
Just for your information, Dan, because this predates you. This originally came to light from a property owner across the street who no longer owns that property, that the ground became so saturated there that his septic system froze up one winter. And right at that ridge, well, that high spot, kind of around where the pond is, that tends to stay muddy there. And so there's no really good close by drainage for that water that's running off from that pond to get into the lake. There's one that's a little bit further upslope on the road. The one that's primarily used is like 400 feet away, 300 feet away. So that's a lot of distance for a lot of water to travel. So it just super saturates the ground. So one way or another, there's some remediation that likely needs to happen there. I mean, when I first investigated this, we were actually in between wetlands agents, and they actually had an excavator there digging up the septic system and finding nothing but frozen water.
Wow.
So on the other hand, if the water gets released in a not so kindly fashion, that they're going to have a big problem also. So what we're kind of looking at all together is just making it some sort of a management for that water there.
Marla, but speaking, I don't think it would hurt to take a look at old aerial photography and see what that site looked like before he did his work, see what the aerials would reveal.
I would just say off the top of my head that pond was at least doubled.
Yeah, which means the amount of storage that's there creates a higher hazard than if it was not there. The water that comes down across the road into Mr. Bentley's property is going to be the same amount of water. The question is how much is he storing there? And ultimately, once the pond is full, it will have to release that water eventually. And if the embankment breaks, then it's a worse situation than if there was no berm there at all. But I think looking at the aerial photography might not be a bad idea at this point in time. And maybe get some screenshots so that we understand, because we're still waiting on DEP to make a decision whether it's so they've called it a Class BB dam.
Yep.
So it's under DEP's jurisdiction. It's not under ours. It's not under our jurisdiction. So then we have to keep finding out what DEP is doing with it, because any work that's not specifically associated with the dam itself, like other grading work that's outside of the impounded area, that's not associated with the dike, and it's not necessary for maintenance of the dike, would be subject to the commission's jurisdiction. So it's going to be a little complicated depending on what he has done and what he plans to do as to what the extent of the dam is versus what other work is that's not part of the dam, like excavation in the impoundment. That's not part and parcel to the dam itself normally. Well, let's just take a look and see what we can see, but technically it would be DEP's jurisdiction. So we're going to have to keep touching base with DEP to find out what the extent of their jurisdiction is. Not just, and to do that, we need to know what other things have occurred outside of the berm building that was not associated with the berm building, but was associated with alteration of a wetland or watercourse outside of the dam issues, so to speak. See what I'm saying? There could have been
So-
grading work that occurred.
Yeah.
That
It
was
looks like we need to send a letter to Ann Alaskan. Just to inform her of that thought, Marla, so that that communication can be created.
Yeah, but before we do that, we need to know what we're looking at. And so I think we still have to look at the historic aerial photography, because I don't think there is any statute of limitations on the Wetlands Act. So we need to get a sense of what the timelines of the changes is on the land and what those might have been caused by. And so that before we send anything to DEP, I think that needs to occur first. I know I have training in aerophoto interpretation. Does anybody else on the commission?
I don't have specific training for that.
Yeah, I work with it all the time, but I don't have a license.
No, there's no license required. It's just whether or not you had training in it. I mean,
Yeah,
have you used stereo pairs and that kind of
no,
stuff?
no,
No, never used a stereo pair? No,
no.
that's okay. And Dan, you don't have any training in that specific to that, do you? In air photo interpretation?
Nothing specific, though. It's a hobby
Yeah.
of mine.
Okay, yeah. Well, experience speaks for a lot, because after a while you look at enough aerial photographs and you look at things on the ground and you get an understanding of what things look like, what shadows look like versus water bodies. Shadows of trees can look like water bodies on the ground. So a lot of times you still have to do some verification. But well, I'd be willing to take a look at aerial photography and see what we've got and provide that to Dan for this one before you send anything to DEP. Because they've taken jurisdiction. At least as of, what's the date on this letter? I always put it
December.
in December, yeah. Wouldn't hurt to find out for Dan to touch base with Ann Alaskan to see what kind of response that they've gotten. I don't know what their timelines are for getting responses back. What do they say? Do they have timelines in here?
Thought I saw it somewhere, but it might have been something like as soon as 30 days, but I'm not sure.
Must be notified of your proposal to schedule or undertake investigations, repairs, or maintenance within 30 days of your receipt of this letter. So the question that Dan, that you have to make to DEP is, when did he receive this letter? I'm assuming it was sent by certified mail if they're saying receipt of 30 days from the receipt of the letter. So maybe just touching base with Ann Alaskan and find out what the receipt date of the letter is, so we know what the time frame was. If they don't have any proof of receipt, then they're going to have to probably resend the letter via certified mail. It says registration request letter. Well, no, it doesn't say it's sent registered certified mail though. So Dan, if you could send a missive over to Ann Alaska and ask her what was the date of receipt of that letter, and
Yep.
what is their timeline that they're working off of right now.
Okay.
Any further discussion on this at the moment?
Yeah, I could just chime in real quick on the date there. Mr. Mead was aware of it apparently on or before February 28th, 2024, according to this letter.
Yeah, but
And
the
he makes
problem,
mention of it in his letter that the Bungie Lake Test District has been actively involved with the Connecticut DEP.
yeah, the problem that we have is if DEP is going to take an enforcement action, they have to be able to meet the standards for that enforcement. So that we're just asking them what evidence do they have that he got the letter, that he was on this 30 days from the receipt? What's the timelines? That's all we're doing at this point in time.
Yep.
And since you're already dealing with an attorney, you want to make sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. And it's not Brian Mead, it's Curran Mead. I believe that's his daughter.
Yep.
Anything further? All right, let's move on down to the next one. Early notice of potential bridge replacement. I don't know that there's any action or discussion that needs to happen on this. It's Kenyonville Road Bridge.
So they're just starting, that's not a state highway though, is it?
No,
So it's a town project, so it would have to come before the town. Before the wetlands agency. Oh, yeah,
so Jason, since you're still on here, I don't know if you would have or could put together a list of all current and pending bridge projects. Because there's 2 or 3 I know that have been approved but haven't gone into construction yet. It looks like something's coming up on Stonebridge Road. And then we're gonna have this one, so I don't know how many actual bridge projects are out there.
That's a good question. These projects have been in the works for so long now, the prices have changed so much.
Yeah,
Things are gonna have to be reworked.
yeah. Well, if you can come up with a list, it'd be kind of good to have an idea of what's in the works and what's pending.
Sure thing. I think the only one in the near future is Peak Brook.
Okay,
and that's got a permit though, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then followed shortly after by Hopkins Bridge by John White's. That one actually may start before Peak Brook.
I'm not familiar with that one.
I don't recall that one either.
Yeah. I don't think we have any permits issued. What's the work going there?
That's a bridge replacement as well.
I want to check your records and see if you got any approvals, because I've been doing this now for
Yeah,
11 years and I don't remember hearing anything about that.
there's a stack of them pending here. It may not be.
Yeah. So depending on when you want to get started, you might want to get those put through the commission, because it takes at least a month to get through, because the first has to be received. We can't render decision according to
Sure.
statute for a month, so it wouldn't hurt to have that stuff moving along and get the approvals.
I believe Peak Brook's supposed to start, well, their timeline was this spring, early summer.
Mm-hmm.
But that looks like it may be getting pushed back as well.
Oh.
Okay, let's move on to, unless there's any other questions about that. The state permit applications for use of pesticides. So this is some parts of the same property that we had timber harvest for also recently. My take on this, I could be totally wrong, is that they're spraying for these invasive, you got 4 listed there further down. But this permit is basically covering for anything around Gravelly Brook. There's a few other brooks that are named there, but I haven't taken enough time to chase everything down and see where the water courses go. If someone's got a different idea about what they're actually proposing here, feel free to make a comment about it.
So typically this is all within the control of DEP.
Yeah.
But what they don't tell you is this drains to Putnam's public water supply. Gravelly Brook drains ultimately,
Into Muddy Brook.
yep, and Muddy Brook drains into Roseland Lake, and Roseland
River.
Lake goes into Little River goes into their
Winnebago,
water treatment facility.
right.
The other thing, they mentioned 2 other bodies of water, 2 other water courses, Mill Brook and North Running Brook. I'm not sure how those work into this either. And I'm not sure, I just don't see that connection.
So under page 8, at the top of page 8, downstream users affected by treatment. Are there any downstream users of water who may be affected by treatment? And they've written no.
That's another one.
So the question is could it, since they're doing it along the brook, it's flowing. I mean, there are downstream users of water. But how far down, they say solution to pollution is dilution, but still you're talking a public water supply. And I think DEP should take that into consideration when they're looking at treatments. That they're the specialists on the use of pesticides. So do they have a section here for sending comments back to DEP? I don't see anything here.
Yeah, 200 feet or less from a public water supply.
Well, that's
Public
just
water
for,
supply well, yeah.
well, yeah, that's not,
Or for water body within a public water supply watershed. That's attachment I.
well, it
know,
is
that-
public water supply watershed, and it is a water, what do they consider water body? Does it have to be impounded? Or an impoundment? Because Putnam doesn't have an impoundment. I think there is a slight dam, but on the little river,
Yeah, there's a
And it-
mill pond there.
a little pond, yeah,
A
a
mill
small pond,
Mill
Sm-
pond, yeah.
yeah.
There used to
small
be a
pond.
mill there, yeah.
I don't know. I think this is something that, Dan, you'd have to touch base with DEP pesticides. And I'm not sure who would be the contact person for that. You'd have to go to their website and see if they have an email address. And then just, send them a copy of this.
And
The
ask
PD
questions.
Yeah, and tell them that the Putnam's public water supply is on downstream. And you could give them a map, I don't know, it's quite a ways downstream. I mean, it's not like nearby.
Yeah, I don't know much about these pesticides applications, so I look forward to learning a little bit more.
Well, I can tell you that when we had them in Thompson and I asked questions about them before COVID hit, they were actually looking at when the application came in. This is just saying what they want to do, but then they have a requirement that the applicator has to provide them information as to what they actually applied and when they applied it and where they applied it. And they were starting to track that, and then they stopped. COVID hit and they stopped. So I don't have any idea if anybody's tracking once they apply for it, do they actually know what actually got applied? Because this is just an application. You don't have to execute what's in the application. And I think there was supposedly some kind of follow-up report that they were supposed to provide. And I don't know who in DEP handles this anymore.
Yeah, I'll ask those questions.
Yeah, okay.
Did your previous experience with these have any local permitting
No,
or local? Yeah.
there's been an argument about whether or not, because it is an alteration of a water course, whether or not there's no agreement as to whether or not the wetlands law can supersede the authorization by DEP for the use of pesticides. It's not clear. I know when Steve Cessatori was running the wetlands program, it wasn't a clear issue. You can ask that question, but I don't really think we want to get into the business of deciding whether or not a particular pesticide is usable or not. that really should be staying with DEP. They just should be put on notice that there's a public water supply, surface water supply downstream. Which this application doesn't seem to indicate. I think if you just notify them and just report back to us if they gave a response back to you, I think that should be enough. I don't think we have jurisdiction.
Okay, I'll share my updates.
Okay.
There any other discussion on this application? For this item? All right, let's move on and the other is the proposed solar power facility. I don't know that we have anything to discuss on this right now. There are some green line delineations there that I'm not sure what those, if those are supposed to be wetlands or what.
Yeah, the legend says wetland edge,
Okay.
but I don't know, as you said, if it's a delineation or the extent of a review area.
Okay. And if, since this is coming through potentially the siting council, do we have any jurisdiction at all on this?
We have advisory. Typically, when it comes in, the commission can give advisory comments to the siting council. Meaning, when the application does get filed, they said they were gonna file it with the town. See, it says, once filed, a full copy of the petition will be placed on file at the Woodstock Town Hall for your review. An additional electronic copy of the petition will be available on the siting council's website. So then if you have any further questions or concerns, please contact me. So I do believe they have to take into consideration comments from the commission, in the Wetlands Commission, in the Wetlands Agency. But they are we don't have jurisdiction when
Okay.
siting council gets involved. It's just advisory.
This is the first I've heard. What is the siting council?
It regulates energy transmissions and hydroelectric and your transmission lines, generation sites, electric generation sites. You'd have to take a look at the statute
Okay,
that it falls under. It's a little complicated, but DEP can weigh in on it. They are actually, I believe, have a representative on the siting council. I don't know what other state agencies have representation on the siting council, but typically it's just an advisory role.
so they're advising on the appropriate nature of each site, probably.
Yeah, and the alterations that occur to that site, they require soil erosion and sediment controls under their authorization. So that's all handled through them. But my guess would say is once the petition comes into town hall, and it says it looks like they're filing a petition for a declaratory ruling with the siting council on or after March 4th. So it may have already been done. This may have already, so Dan, you might want to check to see if the petition was placed on file. And I don't know where at town hall. You might have to call Mr. Baldwin to find out where it is. Or you could go on the siting council and see what they've got there. Because he gives the website on the letter.
I think it would have been big news if a petition did get brought in. That news would have circulated around the town hall pretty quick. I'll check out the siting council website and see where that link follows.
Any further comments on that? All right, let's move on. I would like to propose that we send a letter to Jay Swan or the selectmen to request that they do some improvements to the other end of Payne Road, because there's still piles and piles of gravel that are getting washed into the wetlands at the low spot right at the sort of near the end of the paved portion of the road. The ditches on the side of the road have gotten very deep, probably close to 3 feet in some places. Some of the roads washed out and could be rendered kind of impassable with more storms this week even. So, but it's just that there is a very large amount of gravel getting washed into the wetlands.
Bill, is that the westernmost length of Payne Road?
Yeah, kind of right where the pavement, just east of where the pavement stops. But that whole ditch on that side of the road is washed out. I think it was filled in mostly probably last year. I don't recall 100%, so I couldn't say. But there's a very severe drop off there now, and like I say, all that gravel from there is in the wetlands. So that would be another place where they should address.
I was talking with Jay Scranton today about a few other roads that are getting out of hand. Some of them on scenic designated roads. Just as Maura Roby presented a few months ago, those photographs, it's becoming a very town-wide phenomenon that we do need to inventory and prioritize, because I think there's a lot of these to fix.
Yeah, I did look at the University of Pennsylvania program there that Maura suggested. I did download a few things, but I haven't forwarded them to you yet. My idea with that is, after investigating a little bit more, it might be worth sending Jason Scranton and maybe a foreman down there, because I believe they do some sort of workshops or conferences for some training on the, get sent on behalf of the town. And if it's that worthwhile to have, it might be even worthwhile to consider trying to form a group and get them to bring a workshop up this way.
Yeah. We're not the only ones facing this problem. And on ZBA, members recently discussed trying to get some regional trainings organized on land use issues. And I think the Land Use Academy is trying to pick the programs they think that'll have the most reach and with a regional approach. And I'm gonna pitch this to them, that this is an issue afflicting us, and that this probably needs a wider discussion. But I think if we could, it's probably easier to get the training closer to here than not to send somebody out there, or at least easier to send or to have somebody take their training local than to send them away for a conference or.
Yeah, just I don't know if they're gonna get the same information for what they get
Sure.
local as they might get. It's this university institute that specializes in this. So I'll send the information along to you, and you can take a look at it too.
Thank you.
So do you want to pursue a letter, or you want to consider that they're pretty aware, or that their issues are growing with the dirt roads in general?
I could, based on what I saw the other day, I don't mind lumping that into a memo that I'm gonna be sending with, echoing Maura Roby's concerns from a few months ago that this is getting worse and worse. If you want an official letter from the commission, we probably have to find our rationale and jurisdiction. Is it affecting the Petro downstream, or is this just wetlands
The
along
other
the side of
side,
the road?
it's the other side of the hill.
Okay,
So it's kind of a different, it'll eventually make that water course, but it's like a mile away, more towards my house, the end of
But
Red
there,
Hill Road.
but there are wetlands that issue is affecting.
Yeah, there's like hundreds,
Okay.
From the road to 100 feet into the woods, that's in a wetland area that's got a lot of gravel in there. That's all came from the road, so.
I'd be happy to send a letter if that's what the commission wants to do, but I was gonna send a memo.
Does anybody
But,
else have any comments or ideas on that?
My thought is that I took a recent drive down Payne Road when the draft site plan came in. I wanted to see what the side looked like, so I started Doug Hill, not Doug Hill. I started from Payne District Road and drove up the hill and over the hill, and I saw how bad the washout was. I saw the siltation of the wetlands. I don't know how deep the sediment is. But it clearly needs to be addressed, but I don't know if I want to do it. I don't know how much information they have, and I think it would behoove us to have Dan send a memo out with a copy to the commission, what he sends to, and it should be to the Board of Selectmen and to Jason, identifying the situation that we've seen and ask them to come back with suggestions as to how they intend to handle the conditions on that side of the road. And see what the response is to Dan's memo. And depending on how that works, because the amount of sedimentation that I saw in there doesn't look like it would take it out of jurisdiction. It clearly is silting in the wetlands in a significant way. And but I haven't looked at the aerial photography to see how far, where it hits a critical habitat. That's a red maple swamp that's there. And they can take some varying with sediments, but if you have a water body, a pond or a confined water body that starts getting sedimented in, that's different. Like Dr. Luby's pond is a situation where from like Bull Hill, if they don't fix the issues on Bull Hill, it's going to silt in his pond. What I saw on Payne Road was a red maple swamp, which can absorb a good amount of sediment. In fact, all of our wetlands have been sedimented and all of our red maple swamps have had sediment since man has come in. DOT did a study back, I think about 25 years ago, and they determined that all of our wetlands have had silt in them. The question is does it get to the point where it stops them from functioning the way they need to function? And that system, that bill that you're talking about, it's getting close. If they don't do something, it will cause a problem. But I haven't looked at the aerials to see what's down immediately, like what's like within 1,000 feet downstream from where that sedimentation is occurring. I don't know how flat the watershed is. I don't know how flat the land is or where it twists and turns. That might take.
I think that comes, the brook that's pretty close to the Hibbert farm.
Okay.
It's almost like a valley down there. That's over the hill from the Petro's house. So eventually that would end up in that Peckham Brook also, but
Yeah, so I would suggest having Dan start with that and identifying that as an area that the commission has found to be problematic and needs to be addressed, and ask for a position, what the town is what the Public Works Department intends to do about that, and see how they respond to it. Obviously, it had to be going on for a long period of time. It's not something that's new, but it looks like it was pretty badly washed out when I drove down it. It was one-way traffic. I mean, you couldn't have two vehicles go by.
is everyone
Yes.
okay with that?
Yep, I am. I think every gravel road is having the same issue, especially if it's on a slope. Pulpit Rock Road is really, really, really dangerous in a way. I don't want to say dangerous to frighten you, but I mean, it's just pretty bad. So I think that, the town has its challenges, but almost every road that I go by, I don't even know the name of all, but they need a lot of maintenance.
Okay, well, that sounds like a plan if everybody's okay with that. And if Dan, you're willing to do that, that would be great.
I'll put that together tomorrow and ask that it be on their next agenda.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a few other comments, but let's move on to Dan's wetlands agent report.
So I didn't get to author a paper or a written report as I'd hoped, for a myriad of excuses. There was a lot of the stuff that we did talk about through correspondence would have made up the substance of that. There was one thing I'd like to add that we didn't cover. So we'll be adopting our FEMA flood maps at some point. And I think the town has to designate a floodplain administrator. And there's been some internal back and forth on who is the appropriate person to be the floodplain administrator.
Who is it currently under ordinance?
I don't think anybody knows.
Well, in order to have FEMA flood insurance in town, you had to have an initial ordinance back in when the maps were first brought in, which would have been in the 80s, most likely. So I think you have to look at the ordinance, see if has to be an ordinance in order to have the low cost flood insurance in town. So
a designee would have been named in the ordinance.
in that ordinance, just like in Thompson, they had the building inspector was originally the administrator.
So I've relayed to Jay Scranton and our building official and our town planner how it's been broken down in other municipalities that I've worked at or been on commissions. Thompson was an easy reference that the building official is the floodplain administrator. The appeals agency is in the Wetlands Commission. Windsor Locks was also the building official. The zoning officer was a deputy floodplain administrator. In my research, I've seen consultant engineers, town planners who have a certified background in floodplain management, public works directors. It's not consistently the same person who is the floodplain administrator in every town. And I think it seems that it's something that nobody wants to have the responsibilities named on them. I believe that it should lie with the building official because there's a lot of interpretation of building code here that I wouldn't know anything about. But I think there's, the wetlands agent could be deputized to administer some sections of that ordinance, but for the most part, my experience has been with homeowners wanting to improve their riverfront or property beyond a certain threshold, and the building official is the keeper of all the records of improvement and can identify, how much of a remodel exceeds what FEMA is allowing for that particular location. And so to me, I don't see anybody but the building official having the knowledge to make that determination. I think wetlands agency is a a good fit for an appeal board. But that, I just wanted to make the commission aware that, this discussion is, churned up.
Dan, question, have you gotten any indication from FEMA when they're gonna be done with the Shetucket mapping?
Sorry, I muted myself. No, thank you for reminding me. I do want to check in on that.
Because that's when it'll become critical. Because the way the laws changed, if you look at section 8-2L of the Connecticut General Statutes, it says that when FEMA requires you to change your ordinance, when they do that when they're updating the plan, updating the mapping, which they just did in Thompson, they changed the way you can do work in the floodplain. So up till now, like in Woodstock, you can be allowed, FEMA allows you to fill the floodplain up to a floodway if the watercourse has a floodway. And then you're not allowed to fill in the floodway. But once they update the maps and put in new maps, you can no longer fill in the floodplain without compensation storage provided. And that's a significant difference over what the old language was, what the current in Woodstock is. And when that happens, it's going to create a lot of problems for people who have, like, for example, Mr. Grenier has a 100-year floodplain on his property. And if he wanted to fill, now he could fill part of it and not violate FEMA standards as long as he's out of the floodway. That FEMA doesn't care. But after the maps get updated, he would not be allowed to fill the floodplain unless he provided compensation storage associated with that floodplain. And so that's going to significantly change how the floodplains are going to be allowed to be modified. And Woodstock got left out of the map changes because they were only doing the Quinnebog River. They weren't doing the Shetucket. And half of Woodstock is in the Shetucket and half of it's in the Quinnebog. So the next thing that they were doing in the Thames River watershed is the Shetucket. And I don't know how close they are to finalizing those maps. So half of the maps in Woodstock have already been drafted, those that are in the Quinnebog watershed, but the Shetucket they don't have yet. And once they get them, then they're going to tell the town that they've got to upgrade the mapping if they want to have low-cost flood insurance in your town. And to do that, you're going to have to upgrade your ordinance, which is what Thompson already went through. And how we're trying to address that in Thompson, because I'm working under a contract with them to upgrade their regulations. And we're requiring all wetlands applications have the FEMA floodplain identified on it, because the Wetlands Commission in Thompson is the appeal agency. So anytime somebody's doing work in the FEMA floodplain, we want to know exactly what they're doing. And not all applications will come to the Inland Wetlands Commission, but at least those that are touching wetlands, watercourses, or upland review areas will have an identification of where that floodplain is. And they're all put on GIS. They're not paper copies. What we have in Woodstock is paper copies, or you can go electronically online and look them up on FEMA's mapping. But after, when they upgrade them, they're all going to be they're all digitized, and they can be put on your GIS application, so everybody knows where that line is on their property. So that's coming for Woodstock down the road, and that's probably what's causing all this question as to who's going to be responsible. But it really needs to be the building inspector, because the majority of that ordinance deals with things that deal with structures, buildings. You know, do you have breakaway walls for areas where you have flood flow that has to go through? Have you put your electrical outlets above the 100-year flood elevation? Things like that. Nobody else can do that but the building inspector. If you had a town engineer, you might have been able to have an administrator as a town engineer, but most of this is building code. A lot of it's building code, not all of it, but a lot of it. So yeah, find out what, I would suggest finding out where they stand on their mapping for the Shetucket.
Okay.
When will we be seeing these FEMA maps updated?
You don't, that's what he's got to find out.
Oh,
That's why he's got to contact FEMA to find out what's going on for the Shetucket.
okay.
And you have anything else?
Um, if always something that might be slipping my mind when I don't write it down. But that is the substance, I believe. Mr. Grenier, I spoke with him today. He's looking at hoping to be on the May meeting for discussions of his berm. I'd like to go out with Stu again, maybe at some point within the next week and a half, if that works for you. We'll
Sure.
pin it down and try to suss out exactly all of his intention with the design, and so we have something a buttoned up plan that the commission can review.
Yeah, I can do that.
I did reach out to the health district for more information about his septic approval, and I did receive quite a volume of information, but I haven't been able to pick it apart yet. I'm going to be sending that around by PDF.
So again, I missed part of that. What?
The health department
Oh.
had I'd asked for records about the septic.
Oh,
And there's a lot of sources for our research that they provided. I'm sure within that, but I think it's going to raise some questions too. But I'm going to share that PDF with members by email.
sounds like a good plan.
Bill, can we go back for just a moment to Payne Road?
Yep, sure.
Okay, so I just took a look at the aerial photography for that, and that's a very large flat wetland, and it's the first impoundment. It's a pond on one of the farms, is about a half a mile downstream, and it's fairly flat through that whole system until you get closer to the pond. So I'm guessing what's happening is the pond that's on that I don't know if that's real close to Hibbard Road. That pond is next to that farm on Hibbard Road. Is that Hibbard's farm?
Yeah, Yeah.
Yeah, that's the first impoundment. And there's no evidence, and I suspect that the water course that gets to that pond is an intermittent water course. So it's not showing up real clear on the aerial photography, and it doesn't look like there's any delta in that from the 2016 aerials. So I'm guessing that a lot of that sediment that's coming off of Payne Road is probably just affecting that area next to the road itself. And depending on how deep that sediment is, if the sediment gets more than 6 to 8 inches deep, it can kill the trees.
mhm,
So
yeah.
as long as it stays flat and narrow, it's probably not, it's just going to get reincorporated into the system. Lucky, because we don't have a situation like we have on Mr. Petro's property. So I after looking at that and seeing that the first impoundment is a half a mile downstream in a very flat, large wetland system interceding it, I think the best way is to send the memo, have Dan send the memo instead of a formal letter at this point in time.
Okay, that's good to me.
Mhm.
Does anybody else have any comments at this point? Dan, would you like to make any comments on the land use meeting that we attended?
Yeah, I think, sure. We, had a in-house, meeting. I think on the, was it the
The 18th, I think.
18th?
Yeah.
Bill was able to attend, the chairman, Jeff Marcotte of the Planning Commission attended, Jay Swan, Delia Fay, me, Tracy Giarusso, the administrative land use clerk, and, Cameron, who's a town planner, a planner with, NECOG, kind of an understudy for Delia. We, so there's kind of a butting of heads sometimes of procedural and jurisdictional issues with the Planning and Zoning Commission, which were brought up. They were concerned about how information comes out of our office, but I kind of believe the concerns were unfounded. Their main concern was special permit type of how communication goes with special permits. And we are very much hands off with special permits. If it looks like it's veering into special permit territory, we say, you really want to talk to our town planner and refer them from there. So I think it's kind of personalities, but I pointed out, some things that I wasn't, statements that were made that I wasn't happy with. But I think we needed to air some of this to correct how it's been going with the land use office and that commission. It wasn't supposed to be a pick on planning and zoning or pick on the land use office, but there was grievances that hadn't been discussed that were brought up, and the next meeting I had with planning and zoning went great.
Good.
But it was about mutual respect and that kind of collegial expectation that we kind of really weren't getting. So I think it helped address some issues and improve the footing that we're on and the communication that we're now working to improve. Bill, did you have anything you wanted to put in?
No, it was just that I was concerned that seemed like you were getting a lot of unkind treatment from planning and zoning, to put it nicely.
Yeah, it's just I haven't ever really heard anything nice ever said about anybody that's ever been in my office. And it's just, and I had to bring up, nobody's stupid. Like, we're all educated. We all have different areas of expertise, but nobody's dumb here. I mean, and the tone of things needs to change. And I pointed out a couple of examples, and I think they realized kind of that it was not conducive to a collegial approach. So that my next meeting with them went much better. There's, I think, improved communication with PZC and the office. We're not dumb. There's some things that we haven't encountered, and that we hope for some grace and guidance. If someone's more familiar with a certain thing, don't just leave us standing there in the dark. Give us a hint and tell it, or if even just tell us it's in the regs, and okay, we'll do our homework on it then. But basic questions could be handled more considerately and productively than we were getting for a little while. but I think it's it's improving.
Oh, good. I had me concerned. So, don't want to lose you right off the bat.
No, I mean, it's a challenge. Zoning is a challenge. It's not fun. I don't think anybody loves zoning. But the more I find myself in it, there's a few major league challenges every week that I'm going to learn something from and know how to process something a little easier the next time I see, an analog. And it's all experiential. So it in theory could get easier over time if things start to get a little more routine. There is overlap still with the firm Tyke. They're going to be with us through April. They're still authorized to act as ZEOs. So the town's got, I think, four people authorized to act as ZEO. Their crew and myself. And I've been able to lean on John Guskowski quite heavily on the weird applications. And he's helping me prepare my rationales for when I have to make a decision that the commission might not necessarily agree with, but it's within the reg and my jurisdiction and according to statute. So he's helping me button up my rationales when I have to present to them. And they're a great help. We have them through April. And then I think the door is open for them to consult when I have to take the Casio course. I think, and that's going to be scheduled for June.
Well, the P and Z has to realize that they need you more than they think. I mean, there's a learning curve for both of you working together, but you two arms, one's a right arm and one's a left arm. So
I have to prove my worth. I've worked with a lot of commissions and they have to see what you can do and then know what they can rely on you for. And then until then, I'm an unknown element. But I think I'm not going to make decisions that they always agree with, but I want to show them how I came to that decision and guide them rather than it be an adversarial kind of relationship. But I think it'll get there over time.
I think it's a question of balance, Dan, and it's just growing into the position and building up the relationships. So what happened after? What was the outset of that meeting that you had that I missed?
So the planner called the meeting or organized the meeting to get on the same page with Planning and Zoning Commission. But before we had that meeting, I had a meeting with the Planning and Zoning Commission that it kind of picked up right where they left off at the last meeting I had with them a year ago. And it was a legal training, so there wasn't any applications up for debate. It was just Rich Roberts presenting. And a couple of the lines of questions just expressed severe doubt in how the zoning officers have made decisions, and what is the recourse for the commission to appeal a ZEO's decision. And it's one of those things I normally shrug off, but a year ago, it was like the last question they asked when I attended the last legal training before I shut off those zoning responsibilities. Those almost like picking right back up where they left off critically, and I hadn't even had a decision made yet. I was and I just felt that Tracy gets it more frequently because her communication with the commission and Delia is more frequent than mine. And she's taken umbrage to just the tone and the criticism, and
Yeah.
it came out at the meeting. But I think it needed to be aired.
Is there a way that those meetings can continue? It seems like that would be of benefit.
Maybe, yeah. And if we throw another one like that, we'll get all the chairs in to sit down. I'd rather not do another one anytime soon.
Well,
I think it took 2.5 hours of the morning, and there's a lot of work that goes on. I don't want anybody, waiting outside my office thinking a meeting's gonna be getting out, and they're trying. So if it's I think as zoning board of appeals discussed quarterly meetings, I think it wouldn't hurt to do one every few months or 4 months, because our town planner is not in-house. We contract our services through NECOG, so we maybe only see each other 2 or 3 times a month, and that's if she's reviewing some Mylars that were brought in, or is meeting a potential special permit applicant. But with email communication and even by phone, I think a lot of human communication is through body language, and it's lost in the mediums that we communicate with most frequently. So meeting together humanizes everyone.
mhm.
And I think it would probably be smart to have one of those again at some point in the future, though. I don't really want one next month or anything. But I'll let you know when discussion of one is in the works, or if the chairs are ready to propose one again. We'll make that happen, and we'll get everybody at the table again. We missed you, Stu.
Yeah, I was sorry to have missed it.
No, I understand.
Well, from my perspective, I just contributed that, what the wetlands point of view is. To from my understanding is we're basically carrying out the state's enforcement of the Wetland Act. Even though we're locally appointed, we're ultimately agents of the state in carrying out the terms of the Wetlands Act. So that was one thing. The other thing is I mentioned about utes permitted as of right, and that sure there are such things, especially for agriculture, but people don't get to determine those for themselves. That we're the ones, if it's in our jurisdiction, are the ones who make that determination based on what the project involves. There was a third thing, I don't remember exactly what it was, but that was kind of a few of the viewpoints that I've just presented to them, so that because they might not have heard those perspectives before.
Were they having any problem with the way the Wetlands Commission was rendering its decisions?
No,
Yeah, they didn't say anything to me, but I mean,
So were,
most of the focus of the meeting was the planning and zoning and town planner interaction, and just getting a face on everybody, and Stu's gets, Dan, if you have anything else to.
no, I don't think there was any critical element to how they receive or how things flow to them from wetlands.
what about the other way around? How does it float from planning and zoning to wetlands? So there's 3 situations that if they get an application that contains wetlands or water courses, an application for a subdivision,
Subdivision.
an application for a site plan approval, or an
Mhm.
application for a special permit, any of those plans have wetlands on them, they're supposed to at the same time come to the Wetlands Commission. Historically, I only thought it was subdivisions, but it's not. It's also site
site
plan
plan.
reviews and special permits. So didn't know if they are directing their applicants when they see that a site plan has has wetlands on it or a water course, just has to be on the property, doesn't have to be being altered. It's supposed to be submitting an application either for a jurisdictional ruling from the commission or an actual application for the work that they're proposing.
I think,
That's the other point that I brought up is that you said it on the property, but it doesn't have to be on the property either. It could be in an area that would affect the wetlands, either upland review or, we have an interpretation that it could be something further than the upland review that could have some impact that we might have some jurisdiction over.
Yeah, that would be true for just people having to submit applications to us, but in those cases where planning and zoning gets either a subdivision, a re-subdivision, a site plan review, or a special permit application that has wetlands on the property, the statute requires they have to submit an application to the Inland Wetlands Agency. Before they render their decision, they're supposed to get the comments back from or report back from the Wetlands Commission. I always thought it was just a subdivision. It's not. It's a whole bunch of, it's more than just a subdivision.
Well, I also made the point to them that it's not just standing water you have on a property. It's needs to be determined by a soil scientist that
Yeah.
it's somebody could say that they don't have any wetlands, but they don't, they're not the expert, the authority to weigh in on it.
They don't have that in their regulations to require that the wetlands be delineated by a soil scientist on applications they receive?
That I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not that versed in that.
I just made the point in case they weren't seeing it
Okay.
out of their radar.
Well, that would put it on their radar if it was a requirement in their regulations to have it on their plans. That may be something I want to look at down the road, not now.
I've noticed on subdivision Mylar that there wasn't a block for wetlands chairman's signature. And I think if a subdivision went through our commission, that it should receive the on the land records the endorsement of the chairman. But I think Delia's generally pretty good about with every applicant she worked with saying, and you want to talk to Dan about wetlands.
Yeah, but if it's not in the regulations that it's a requirement, then they don't have to do it. It's just if somebody else comes in, it could, Delia's not there, it's gonna be whatever the regulations say at planning and zoning. So at some point, maybe we should be taking a look at their regs real quickly to see if it makes sure that the interests of the Wetlands Commission are taken care of.
Yeah, I'm doing a PDF search of it right now.
I know the building inspector has been pretty good. If somebody comes for permit saying, well, are you in the historic district? Do you have wetlands, et cetera, and telling them, don't even bother with me until you talk to those other people first.
Why don't you look into it, Dan, and get back to
Yeah,
us?
yeah, it's
It's a
little
little
more
complicated.
the word delineation isn't there, but there could be there's 34 references to wetlands in the zoning regs, so it could be a nuance of how it's phrased. But I will I've made note on that, and I'm gonna get back to you guys on that.
Sounds good. Okay, let's move along and we believe we have any citizens here for comments. Does anybody else have any other comments that they'd like to make at this point before we adjourn? All right, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All right, meeting's adjourned at 9:04 PM. Thank you very much, everyone. We'll see you next month. Looks like May 6th will be the date. Thank you, Dottie, for all your work. We appreciate you very much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Good night.
Have a good one, everyone.
Yeah, you too.